All right, ready to dive into some seriously smart cruise booking strategies.
Let's do it.
So picture this. You're planning your dream cruise. Are you getting the best deals, the best experiences, or are you just hitting that easy button and booking directly through the cruise line?
Hmm. I know I've been guilty of that.
But travel expert Gary Bembridge from Tips for Travelers has some advice that might just flip your whole booking process upside down.
Really?
He says there are actually 4 things you should never book through the cruise line,
I mean, some things seem like, well, wouldn't going straight to the source be the best?
like booking the cruise itself. I always figured that would be the cheapest way to do it. It's like with hotels, you go direct, right?
You would think. But the cruise industry, it's a whole different ballgame. Cruise lines actually have a super close relationship with travel agents.
Oh, really?
It's not about undercutting them, it's
Yeah.
more of a partnership. Think of it this way. Agents help cruise lines fill those cabins that maybe aren't selling as quickly. And in return for helping them sell those, the agents often get access to extra perks and deals that they can then pass on to you,
Like onboard credit, maybe?
or sometimes even cabin upgrades.
That's pretty cool. So using a travel agent doesn't mean I'm paying more.
It's like having a personal cruise concierge who knows all the ins and outs of the industry.
Someone who's cruise obsessed who can do all the legwork for you.
They can look at all the different options, compare prices from different lines, and find you the perfect itinerary for what you want to do.
Bembridge actually said his travel agent suggested a Greenland cruise, which he hadn't even thought of, and it turned out to be a way better fit than what he was originally looking at.
It's all about that personalized advice. A good agent's going to ask you questions you haven't even considered and open up possibilities you didn't even know existed.
That makes sense, especially with all the different cruise lines and itineraries out there. What about flights, though? Should we be booking those separately, too?
He's found that they often prioritize those bulk deals with certain airlines over passenger convenience.
Oh. So you might end up with less desirable routes.
Longer travel times. He had this happen on a Silversea cruise out of Cape Town, actually. The cruise line's flight had a bunch of stops and took like twice as long as a direct flight he was able to find on his own. That's the last thing you want when you're trying to start your cruise relaxed and stress-free. So he prefers booking direct flights whenever he can, especially for international trips.
Makes sense. Okay, so we're booking the cruise and flights separately. Now, what about getting to and from the port? Those transfers can be tricky, especially in a place you've never been before.
Bembridge is a big fan of Uber
Oh, yeah.
or those pre-booked car services
I see.
for transfers.
Yeah.
He likes flexibility.
Yeah, and it's often cheaper, too.
Exactly. But there's one exception he highlights. Unfamiliar ports.
If you're in a new city, dragging luggage around, trying to find the terminal, and maybe you're on a tight schedule.
In Barcelona, which is a really well-known port city, he had a really smooth Uber ride straight
Yeah.
to the terminal. But in Valparaiso, Chile, he had a really hard time finding the cruise terminal in a taxi. Turns out it was kind of tucked away in an obscure spot. And in that case, he wished he had just gone with the cruise line's transfer.
Maybe the cruise line's local knowledge is worth the extra cost.
It's all about weighing the options for your specific situation, right?
Be smart, be adaptable. Now, what about hotels? Before or after the cruise, I mean. Do a lot of people just book those through the cruise line, too?
A lot of people do. They want the convenience of it all being bundled together, and they think they're probably getting the best deal. But Bembridge found that he could often get a better price on hotels by booking directly.
So the cruise line isn't always giving the best deal on hotels either.
When you book direct with the hotel, sometimes you can snag a better room, maybe one with a nicer view or on a higher floor.
Oh, nice.
And plus, then you can earn those loyalty points with the hotel chain. But I do like the idea of having everything sort of packaged together, especially if, like, my flights get messed up or something.
Right.
Wouldn't I be on my own to sort everything out if I book everything separately?
That's a good point, but a lot of travel agents can actually package your flights, your transfers, and your hotels all together,
Oh, really?
while still being your main point of contact if anything goes wrong. Bembridge actually tells a story about how his agent totally saved the day when his flight to Panama City got canceled. The agent found him new flights, adjusted his transfers, changed the hotel bookings, all seamlessly.
Wow, talk about service.
Yeah.
So you're not necessarily giving up convenience or that peace of mind by booking things separately. Exactly. It's all about finding a good travel agent who can be your advocate and take care of all those logistical details.
Okay, so far we've talked about booking the cruise itself, the flights, transfers, and even hotels. A lot to think about. What else should we be thinking about before we set sail?
The big one Bembridge really stresses is travel insurance.
Travel insurance, super important. But is there something specific about cruising that makes it even more crucial?
Cruises can be expensive, and if something unexpected happens, those costs can really add up quickly.
Yes.
He tells a story about a couple who had a scooter accident in Cozumel.
Oh no!
They didn't have insurance, and they ended up with a $20,000 medical bill.
That is a nightmare scenario. So I'm guessing this is where cruise line insurance comes in. Yeah.
But Bembridge advises against just automatically going with the cruise line's insurance without doing a little comparison shopping first.
So it's not as simple as just ticking that little box during the booking process.
Right. He's found that third-party providers often have much cheaper policies that offer way more coverage. And get this, cruise line insurance might not even cover your pre- or post-cruise expenses unless you book those things through them as well.
Oh, wow. That's a pretty big difference.
And they also tend to have lower medical coverage limits compared to those independent insurance companies.
So if you had a real medical emergency and your coverage wasn't enough.
And here's another thing to watch out for. If your cruise gets canceled, some cruise line policies will only offer you future cruise credits instead of a cash refund. Exactly.
It definitely sounds like it pays to do your homework, compare options from those reputable insurance companies. All right, so far we've got 4 things that Bembridge says never to book through a cruise line: the cruise itself, flights, transfers, and travel insurance. My mind is blown a little. What's the final piece of advice he has for savvy cruisers?
This one's a biggie. It's all about shore excursions. Bembridge says you should always be wary of just booking excursions through the cruise line without checking out your other options and comparing prices first.
That seems to be the general rule of thumb for pretty much everything we've talked about today.
So what are the alternatives to booking those excursions through the cruise line? Well, he has a few suggestions.
Lay mommy.
First off, never book a hop-on, hop-off bus tour through the cruise line. He found that it was literally twice as expensive as buying the ticket directly at the terminal in Barcelona.
Whoa, that's a crazy markup.
Right. And he also says don't book any of those big popular attractions or rides through the cruise line either. They often tack on a big premium just because they can.
Yeah, I can see that.
He gives examples of how he saved a ton of money on things like the Flam train and Lowen Skylift in Norway, the White Pass and Yukon train in Alaska, just by booking them on his own.
So if it's a well-known attraction, probably best to figure out how to get there yourself. But what about those more unique, specialized excursions that aren't so easy to book on your own? What about those?
That's where independent excursion providers come in. They often have excursions that are up to 40% cheaper than what the cruise lines offer.
40%? That's huge. Okay, I am sold on the idea of independent excursions, but what about safety? I always felt like if you book through the cruise line, at least you know you're not going to miss the ship if something goes wrong.
That's a common concern for sure. But a lot of these independent companies offer something called missed ship protection guarantees.
Really?
So if their tour makes you late and you miss the boat, they'll get you to the next port.
That's good to know. So it's not like you're taking a massive risk by going with an independent provider. And you might even have a more personalized, authentic experience, probably with smaller group sizes too.
Exactly. It's all about being a savvy traveler. Knowing where to look for the best deals, the best experiences. You can have a smooth, stress-free cruise without overpaying or missing out on amazing opportunities. And keep in mind, these are general guidelines.
Always best to do your homework, compare the options before you make any decision.
And don't be afraid to ask questions.
I bet our listeners are feeling much more empowered to plan their next cruise adventure. Well, I guess we'll have to dive into those secrets another time.
Sounds like a plan. The world of cruising is full of hidden gems, just waiting to be discovered.
So stay tuned, listeners, because we might just have another deep dive into cruising coming your way soon.
You were saying that Bembridge really prefers those independent providers.
He does.
Besides saving money, are there other advantages to booking that way?
Well, one of the biggest perks is you often get a more personalized experience.
How so?
They tend to have smaller group sizes, so you get more attention from the guide, and it just feels more intimate overall.
Yeah, you're not just one of 100 people following a flag around a crowded tourist spot.
Exactly. And you might even get to visit places or do activities that the cruise line doesn't offer at all.
Oh, really? So you get a real feel for the place instead of just seeing those typical tourist traps.
Precisely. And another advantage is they're usually more flexible. You're not locked into that rigid schedule the cruise line sets.
You can kind of linger at a place that speaks to you.
Yeah, or even customize the itinerary a bit.
It's
That's great, but what about safety? I know some people are hesitant to book with those independent companies because what if something goes wrong and you miss the ship?
That's a valid concern, but it really comes down to choosing reputable providers. Yeah,
It just shows you how important it is to do your research and not just take the cruise line's word for it.
absolutely.
You can have a fantastic cruise without emptying your wallet or feeling like you're constantly being upsold. Let's do a quick recap of these 4 key takeaways for our listeners so far. Number 1, consider booking the cruise itself through a travel agent instead of going straight to the cruise line.
Right.
Second, don't assume booking flights through the cruise line is the best or only option. Third way, the pros and cons of independent transfers versus using the cruise line, especially in those unfamiliar ports.
Right. In a well-known city, those independent transfers might save you money and give you more flexibility. But in those less familiar destinations, the cruise line's local knowledge might be worth the extra cost.
And fourth, always compare hotel prices and consider booking directly if you can get a better deal or earn those loyalty points.
And don't forget about the possibility of better room assignments and more flexibility.
And of course, never skip travel insurance.
Never.
Essential for any trip, but especially for cruises. And it's always worth checking out those options beyond what the cruise line offers.
Yeah, those third-party providers often have much more affordable policies with better coverage, and you're more likely to get a cash refund if your trip gets disrupted.
This has been such a great deep dive into the world of smart cruise booking.
It has.
I feel like we're giving our listeners some real insider secrets here, stuff that could save them a lot of money and headaches
Definitely.
and help them have a smoother, more enjoyable cruise.
Absolutely.
It's been great talking with you and getting all these tips and tricks.
My pleasure. I love digging into these details and finding ways to make travel more affordable and enjoyable for everybody.
You know what? I have a feeling this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to cruise secrets.
Oh, I think so too. Bembridge mentioned he has even more to share, especially for those seasoned cruisers.
Really? Like what?
Well, he hinted at some other ways to save money and get the most out of your cruise experience.
Ooh, I'm all ears.
One thing he mentioned was the type of cabin you book.
Oh, interesting.
He says instead of always going for that cheapest inside cabin, you might want to consider what's called a guarantee cabin.
A guarantee cabin? I haven't heard of that before.
It's basically a type of booking where you don't pick the exact location of your cabin,
Yep.
but you're guaranteed a certain category of room, like inside ocean view or balcony.
So you're letting the cruise line decide.
In a way, yeah, but here's the thing. Cruise lines will often offer discounts on those guarantee cabins because they're trying to fill those rooms closer to the sailing date.
So it's kind of a gamble.
It is, but it could really pay off.
You could get lucky and get a way better cabin than you paid for.
Exactly. You might end up with a much better view or a higher deck, or you might get a standard cabin, but either way, you'll probably save some money.
I like it. It's a fun little surprise. Maybe you get an amazing upgrade, or maybe you just get a great deal. It's a win-win.
I like how you think, and Bembridge had another tip about timing your cruise.
Oh, yeah.
He suggests looking at the shoulder season.
The shoulder season? What's that?
It's the time right before or right after the peak season. So for the Caribbean, that would be like April, May, or September, October.
So you're avoiding those huge crowds and those peak season prices.
Right. And you might even get better weather.
Really?
Think about the Caribbean hurricane season runs from June to November. So those shoulder season months of April and May often have calmer seas and more sunshine.
So better weather and a lower price. I'm liking this idea.
Exactly. And one more thing Bembridge says, to keep an eye out for those cruises that offer perks or promotions.
Perks like free drinks, spa treatments.
Some cruise lines will give you things like complimentary drinks packages, onboard credits that you can use for specialty dining, or excursions, prepaid gratuities even.
Those are some great perks, especially that free drinks packet. This has been amazing. I feel like we've gotten a masterclass in cruise booking from Gary Bembridge.
He's got some great advice for sure.
It's amazing how many little tricks and tips there are to save money and make your cruise more enjoyable.
Absolutely.
It's all about being in the know.
Exactly.
All right, so we've talked about booking the cruise, the flights, transfers, insurance, even shore excursions. Phew.
It's always worth looking to see what's out there.
This whole deep dive into cruise booking has been incredible. I think the biggest takeaway for our listeners is to be proactive. Look around, compare prices, make those informed decisions.
Talk to people who've cruised before, travel agents, and think outside the box a little.
Calm seas, cold drinks, and epic adventures for everyone. Join us next time for another deep dive into the world of travel. Until then, safe travels.